slides on here, and then I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting, like sheep without a shepherd or something. I was like, we could go anywhere without my slides. But I do have some form of structure. But this week I was asked by Stephen just to share what's been happening for me with the ministry stuff we've been doing, and basically to testify, because a lot of you guys have been supporting us for as long as I've been here. I've been here 16 years, I think, at this church, and I just love sharing because you guys have prayed for us, supported us, helped us so many times, and so these are your stories that maybe you haven't heard. And he was like, "Can you do that and do a sermon?" And I'll see what I can do. But I thought I'll try to do both, but I'll try to emphasize the stories because I really want to share those with you, and hopefully you can pull out something for yourself in the process of what God might be speaking to you in your journey. I do have both, but I will see how we get through it. This series is called Jesus Is, and so today we're going to be looking at Jesus is the Prince of Peace. I thought that's a term I heard every Christmas, but not necessarily something I heard talked about a lot when I was growing up. But I think it's profound, some of the things the Bible says about Jesus regarding peace. And the verse that gave him that name was Isaiah 9, verses 6 to 7. It says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end." And another translation says, "Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end." Which I find quite hopeful, thinking about it, that of the increase of God's peace there will be no end. It will continue to increase and increase and increase. That's a hopeful thing. I think, especially when looking at some aspects of our history and our world, to think that there's actually a continual hope of increasing peace would be some good news, I think, to a lot of us, and looking at where we don't see peace. I was thinking about, as I was preparing for this, about how my eyes have seen things I can't unsee, and I've heard things I can't unhear, and sometimes that's a gift, sometimes that's not. But sometimes I'm like blown away by the things I've seen, even in the last year or so, but just for the last many years doing peacemaking, I've witnessed things that I can't even put words around, because you see situations that look absolutely impossible to see peace in, and then I watch with my own eyes people step into a place of peace and forgiveness in situations that there's no way anyone would have ever predicted that would be possible. My first time doing peace camp was in Turkey, as you guys would have heard a long time ago, with Syrian refugees and Turks, and on the border of Syria about 7 years ago. And I heard so many stories that I can't repeat, just because it's inappropriate to talk honestly about some people's lives. It's so horrible. It would be censored, and I've heard these from people sharing these stories of things I can't say, but torture and all sorts of losing family members and all sorts of horrible stories, and yet I've also heard them say, "I forgive," and I'm like, what? How on earth can they come out of such horrible circumstances and not just say "I forgive," but run towards forgiveness? They want it. They know there's something there for them, of freedom from the pain they've been through, and to watch people's lives transform almost in moments and see it go on for years after that. They're set free from the bitterness and hatred that they had for the person that killed their father, or for the person that had tortured them for months, or the person who abused them. And it's just such a crazy thing for me to hold in my head, I guess, to be like, I've seen this over and over and over. For some of the most worst atrocities I could think of, seeing God make peace. And it has profound implications on me, because I have to answer the question over and over, is peace possible? And I think I want to say that for you guys, because I guess that's the main question of today. For all of us, is is peace possible? I'm going to go through some stories, but I think for all of us, there's always this question in every circumstance, in every relationship, where we decide what the answer to that question is. Whether we would ever say it or not, we have an answer, and our actions show our answer by where we have given up on certain circumstances, or certain people in our family, or that friendship that went the wrong way, or the state of Australia, I don't know. We have moments where we decide, is this possible, or actually is it a write-off? And I want to challenge us all to come back to that question again and again today of where have I drawn those lines, and where does Jesus draw lines about what's possible? So I wanted to share, just because I wish I could show you all these photos. I had all the photos lined up, but you'll just have to talk to me after I could show you photos. But I just was in Indonesia, and it's cool after 3.5 years of not doing face-to-face, just to come back and see such a world of open doors, of the communities there so eager to do more peacemaking in their communities and welcoming us. I was just with a bunch of guys, and we were invited into Islamic boarding schools, which are quite closed communities, and the kids live at the school. It's a boarding school, and they are often the place where a lot of radicalism is birthed in Indonesia, as comes out of these boarding schools, because most of the boarding schools, these kids spend most of their life just memorizing the Quran and not a lot of other education, although that's changed recently with the government actually making sure they learn other topics. But these closed communities are now opening up, and we were invited to come and share in front of several hundred students and share about the ways in which God has helped us, and helped me in my life and others, and to see a building of trust and relationship across these communities where historically we would have incredible enmity between each other, and there's no way you would ever be invited. I would be invited as an American Christian into their world to speak to their kids. So something has happened there that if you would ask me 5-10 years ago, would that be possible? I would say, no, there's no way you'd ever be invited into these places to speak in this way with these people. But I've been really challenged by that, because my regular days now are filled with that, and it's easy to forget what a miracle it is, that the fact that we even have a door open into these communities, especially looking at the history of the last 2,000 years. There's a lot has happened, and God is happily moving in our world to bring relationships together. And so we did a peace camp, which I think some of you might have been connected or heard from me, but I think something that stuck out to me, this peace camp we did was bringing Christian seminary students together with Islamic boarding school students, and it's really fun to put people together like that, because the first moment, I like it, but I love it because that first moment, everyone is so stiff. When we did it in Afghanistan, my friends in Afghanistan were saying it looked like a fight was about to break out. And then within about an hour, there's laughter and all sorts of things have changed. But in this peace camp, it was amazing to see in the short period of time, over 2 days, to see these Christian schools and Islamic schools going on this process of forgiveness together, one of the first things that happened was these Muslim leaders and this Christian pastors started sharing these profound stories of forgiveness in their life. And they're so profound I can't actually tell you what they were about, because it's just like topics that are not nice to talk about. But I was just, again, going, is this real? Did that really happen in your life, that you could forgive that? Because that is unbelievable what stories of forgiveness are just happening in these communities. And then to see these Christians and Muslims begin to process that together. And I have a picture of this group of girls, half Muslim, half Christian, crying. They're just all bent in a huddle together, crying, praying for each other. And I've never seen that before. I was like, what? On what planet does that happen? That in the process of forgiveness, whatever they were going through personally, they all huddled together and just started to care for each other and pray for each other. And I, again, would have put that in the impossible box. That doesn't happen, or that's something beyond reality, that those communities could come together like that with such heartfelt care and love for each other. And yet, it was just a month ago that happened. And there was also, at the end of the camp, each school prayed for the other school, blessings over them, that they would be able to see God's peace flow through their school. And that was the first time in the Christians' lives that they'd ever prayed for Muslims. And it was the first time in the Muslims' lives they ever prayed for Christians. And there was people were just crying because something was happening deeper than the moment. And I just think of it a lot as there's some things Jesus tells us to do, he doesn't necessarily tell us why. And I think when he tells us to pray for those who persecute you, doesn't always tell us why, what that's going to produce. But when I saw these guys pray for each other, you could just see the room, something else was happening in their hearts that it's like they will never unsee and unfeel what they experienced. And that opens up so many doors for healing in the communities. When I say that these communities are doing this, it's hard for us to see as Westerners because they just look Indonesian to us. But each of these camps has about 20 different ethnic groups. And ethnic groups in Indonesia means hundreds or thousands of years of history between each group. And I don't know which one's which sometimes, but I know that group hates that group because 200 years ago this happened, and this group hates that group, and there's you can imagine 360 of these ethnic groups for thousands of years living on islands. It's a lot of baggage there. And so to see these people coming together and breaking past the hatred that's been there for years, it's been something of a miracle to me to witness, and it's ongoing. Now there's just too many opportunities in Indonesia to keep up with, so I have to be quite picky. But it's just so encouraging that God is doing this, where in Indonesia there's been genocide, where they've massacred each other, where all sorts of stories have happened. And there's one story I wanted to share. I might have shared this a while ago, but my friends in Aceh, when we did this in Banda Aceh, do you guys know where Banda Aceh is? It's the most northern tip of Indonesia, right by Malaysia. It's where the tsunami hit on Boxing Day. And we did a peace camp there. And that place is notoriously dangerous and radical. It's the most radical place in Indonesia. And we did a peace camp with them, and it was amazing to see what was happening in the community as they kept thanking us for coming, because nobody comes, because everyone's afraid of this place. And at the end of the peace camp, this man stood up and spoke on behalf of the whole community and said, "We thank God for the tsunami because it ended the war." Because they had civil war for 20 years up until the tsunami. And the tsunami was such a shock to their system, seeing a fifth of their city disappeared. Fifth of the population gone in one day, and everybody was impacted. Everyone I met lost family members, lost friends, lost everything. And for them to thank God for that, because that was better than the war, that blew my mind, because I was thinking about, like, I would never ever think that would be something to be thankful for. And yet they signed a peace treaty, I think, 6 months after the tsunami, because it was just so much death. Everyone put their guns down, said we're done fighting. And I just share that story because I think so many times in my life, when I have conflict with someone, I think it's just better to leave it alone. I'll deal with that another time. It's better not to deal with it. And when you see a community that did that all the way to the point of war, that they actually thank God for a tsunami, that means war really is hell. Like, that really must have been horrible, like on every level. And to see that this community is coming on the other side of that, they have a testimony to all of us to say, don't go down that road. War is not the path. Violence is not going to lead you to a place of peace. And Stephen wanted me to share some of the stuff that's been happening because it's just exciting times right now, and I just want to share with you that you guys could join me in it, not because you can join me in these far off places, but here in Wollongong, we can do this together. Like, you can join what my Afghan friends are doing, my Indonesian friends are doing. In Afghanistan, despite the Taliban, all these doors have opened for me to do trainings with young people, young women and young men for the last 2 years. We still are able to do these programs. It's really hard to express how. It's like weird miracles have happened that I end up connected with these beautiful young people who, the women are stuck in homes now because they've been stopped from moving. So now they are creating programs to bring peace to every house where they can still visit their friends. So they're going to all the women they know, doing these programs to teach about forgiveness and help bring healing amongst the crazy, horrible tragedies they faced. And I just am like blown away thinking how courageous and resilient are these young women under the Taliban, under all the things they face. They are just actively going, no, peace is possible. Let's share it with everyone we know. Let's keep pushing forward despite all the circumstances being telling us the opposite. And the boys as well are like going into schools to bring a message of peace and forgiveness, even for the Taliban, which is like blowing my mind every time I think about it. And the doors are still opening there, which is like, again, I think is breaking my mind about what is possible and what's not, and who can have peace and who can't. And my friends in Ghana, they're running peace camps every year now, so I've been helping them online. I've trained them, and then they're bringing Muslims and Christians together in West Africa, which is quite intense, and actually building a whole network of young people that are working for peace to reconcile all their communities so that there isn't another war, like the many wars that keep recycling in West Africa between Muslims and Christians. Yeah, I'm just so inspired by those guys and the continual pursuing more and more. And then next month, not even next month, in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I'm going, I don't know when, I need to figure it out. I'm going to Malaysia, because in Malaysia there's been an invite to do this with with this organization that helps all these refugees. Malaysia has 1/5 of their country, which is 5 million people in their country are refugees or stateless. Stateless is way worse than refugee, because they have nothing, they have no hope. But they have welcomed us to do a peace camp there with Afghan and Pakistani and Somali and Rohingya refugees, all these different. Everyone came to Malaysia because you could pay the immigration officer and get in. So they get in, and then they're trapped. They can't get out, and they can't go anywhere, they can't do anything. So it's a huge crisis there, but we have been invited to do these peace camps and things amongst all those communities. So I'm going to go in a couple weeks and do that as an experiment, see is peace possible here too? And then South Thailand has asked us. We've been invited by universities in South Thailand to bring Buddhists and Muslims together because they have been pretty much almost at civil war for decades, and it's very tense right now, and they are desperate for some good news of peace. So I'm sharing that with you guys. I'm also hoping to go to Berlin I've been asked to do a peace event with Afghan refugees. Sorry, I get emotional with that one because these are my friends who were forced to leave under the Taliban. They escaped through the airport like 30 minutes before the bomb went off, if you remember that. So, been so desperate to see them, and yeah. When you get out of a country like that, you quickly learn that getting access to another country like Germany is not heaven on earth. They think that it might be, but it actually ends up being extremely hard. So I'm so keen to bless them and do a peace camp with them and a peace event with Christians in Berlin, which I've never been there or anything, but I'm excited to see that happen. And so I wanted to share all that with you guys. There's so much coming. I've got invitations to do this stuff all over, and I would love for you guys to join me. You literally can come anytime if you want to come in 2 weeks. Let me know. It's just a flight to Malaysia, and then I'll take care of the rest. But but I just share all that to say, I've seen all this stuff. I see it every day. I watch it. I know the people. I've sat with them as they do these wild things of making peace with each other after decades of hatred and bitterness. And my sermon turns to this, that is peace possible? I've found it's almost easy for me to think about peace in Afghanistan for some reason. It's easier for me to think about that sometimes than it is to think about peace in this one relationship in my life or in my family. Or, I every time I do a peace camp, I talk with Afghans, they all go, yeah, peace in our country. Oh, I don't know about in my house. We all do that. We're all the same. It's like, we can imagine, okay, yeah, there'll be peace one day in the world, but I don't know, I've kind of written off that whole journey with that relative or that person. And I want to challenge us today with some of these verses. This is not a side topic in the Bible. Shalom is used 550 times in the Bible. It's not a side word. Shalom is a central part of the entire Old Testament, and 94 times Irene, the word for peace in Greek, is used in the New Testament. This is things that get our attention when we're looking at the Bible, when we're looking at Jesus, the Prince of Shalom, the Prince of Peace. When Jews understood the word, still to this day, they understand the word shalom is not about no conflict and I just feel good inside. It is absolute well-being for a community. It's not just individual, but it is actually a wholeness, rightness of relationships across society, that everything is functioning well together. Everyone is relating well. It's a beautiful image of abundance and coming back to how God has made us. And so when Jesus is said to be the Prince of Peace, we are following him, we serve him, and his vision is peace. And even in Luke, it says John the Baptist, one of his jobs was in leading us to Christ was to guide us to the path of peace. And in Colossians we see that for God in all his fullness was pleased to live in Christ, and through him God reconciled everything to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means of Christ's blood on the cross. Not everyone, everything, absolutely everything on heaven and on earth. I don't know what else there is that is not covered and reconciled by Christ's blood. And that gives me so much hope that there's a way forward. There's something to lean into of reconciliation. And I could go on and on with this, that we've been given a ministry of reconciliation in 2 Corinthians and a message that's for all of us, not just me. I'm not the only one with the ministry of reconciliation, but I wanted to talk about Jesus. Jesus was often asked about reconciling relationships, and we don't like to read it sometimes because it's like a bit abrasive, I find, but like to forgive 70 times 7, when he's literally asking, how many times should I forgive my brother? How are we going to reconcile this? And that's a tough verse, like 70 times 7. And Jesus says in Matthew 5, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, not even you have something against them, just they're upset with you, first go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. And what we see there is Jesus basically says, your worship, what is your worship if you're going to be in broken relationship with this person? When Jesus talks about that, he says, you cannot say you love God who you can't see and hate your brother who you can see. He basically ties together your relationship with God with your relationship with other people. And I've seen that in my life, that as God breaks through in my life, it's usually completely connected with my relationship with someone else. There's like this overlap of like my relationships improve as my relationship with God improves together. I don't know which one leads which, but Jesus is very clear. Don't skip over this if you want to walk in this. And then my last part was from James. It was wisdom that is from above. I think we all would love some wisdom, especially if I'm talking about broken relationships. The wisdom from above is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving. It is gentle at all times and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism. It is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. And I love this verse because my hope is a harvest of righteousness in Afghanistan, in Indonesia, in my family, wherever. I mean, that sounds awesome. A harvest of right relationships, things being right. That sounds beautiful. And then James just says, well, plant seeds of peace. You want the harvest? Plant seeds of peace. And I think that puts it like so practically down for me from this big, how do you deal with Afghanistan or a refugee crisis or my parents or whatever, I mean, which one's bigger, I don't know. But it's like plant seeds of peace, and these seeds are listed above. They're gentle, they're, all these things. So those are my thoughts. We're going into communion. I just wanted to challenge all of us. Is peace possible, and where have you drawn the line? And as we take communion, what does this blood cover? Colossians made it clear. Everything in heaven and on earth. And he is the Prince of Peace who we're remembering at the table. As we remember him, can we open our hearts to the possibility of peace in the places we've written off, the people we've written off, the situations we've written off? Could we open our hearts again to the possibility that another way is possible, a way of peace? And so I want to leave us with that reflection and invite you guys to join my Afghan friends, my Syrian friends, my Indonesian friends, my Malaysian friends in walking in steps of planting seeds of peace, in forgiving and loving our enemies. It's so cool we all could join each other in bringing the Prince of Peace into our world in new ways. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll take communion, and you guys will come up. God, I thank you for the incredible ways you are breaking through in what seem to be impossible situations. Your miracles are not just physical acts or things like that, but you actually do miracles in our families, in our friendships, in our society, healing wounds that no one else thought possible, breaking through in where there was absolute hatred. Your love breaks through, and over and over and over, you love to do this stuff. And I pray for each of us as we take communion, we would be able to open our hearts a bit more to what might be possible through your blood, through you moving in this world, that the peace truly is possible, even where we struggle to believe it. Lead us through this week in planting seeds of peace, where there's only been violence and maybe hatred, but Lord, lead us to follow you, the Prince of Peace. In Jesus' name, amen. So you can have communion as you feel.